Every morning before sunrise, Maria tied her apron and stepped into the small restaurant on the corner of the street. The smell of frying oil and burnt coffee filled the air, but she barely noticed anymore. For her, this place wasn't just a job, it was survival. Maria was a single mother. Every long shift, every aching step, every forced smile was for one reason only: her young child waiting at home. Rent was overdue, school fees were piling up, and some nights she went to bed hungry just so her child wouldn't. The restaurant manager was strict and cold. He cared more about rules than people. No free food. No exceptions, he reminded the staff every single day. Maria nodded like always, even though her heart didn't agree. That afternoon, the restaurant was busy. Orders were coming in non-stop. Maria moved quickly from table to table, wiping sweat from her forehead, her feet burning with pain. She hadn't eaten since the night before. Then the door opened. A quiet man walked in. He wore old, worn-out clothes, his shoes dusty, his shoulders slightly hunched. He didn't look dangerous, just tired. Hungry. Invisible. Some customers glanced at him and quickly looked away. The manager noticed immediately. His face tightened with irritation. "Sit over there," he said harshly, pointing to the worst table in the corner. The man nodded politely and sat down without complaint. Maria watched from behind the counter. Something about the stranger made her pause. The way he sat quietly. The way he avoided eye contact. The way he folded his hands like someone who had learned to expect nothing. Her heart tightened. She knew that look. It was the same look she saw in the mirror on her hardest days. And in that moment, Maria didn't know it yet, but her kind heart was about to change everything. The quiet man remained seated in the corner, his hands resting calmly on the table. He didn't call for service. He didn't complain. He simply waited. Maria noticed how different he was from the other customers. Most people snapped their fingers or waved impatiently when they wanted something. This man did neither. When Maria finally approached, he looked up with tired eyes and offered a small, polite smile. "Good afternoon," he said softly. Before Maria could reply, the manager's sharp voice cut through the room. "Hey," he shouted from the counter. "What are you doing just standing there? Take his order and make it quick." Maria nodded and turned back to the man. "What would you like, sir?" The man hesitated. He glanced at the menu, then quietly said, "Just water is fine." Maria froze for a moment. Water? She looked at him again, at his thin jacket, his worn shoes, the way he avoided looking around the room. From behind them, the manager scoffed loudly. "If you're not ordering food, don't take up space," he said. "This isn't a shelter." Several customers looked over uncomfortably. A woman near the window frowned. A young man shook his head slightly. But no one spoke. The man lowered his gaze. "I understand," he said calmly. "I'll leave if you want." Something inside Maria tightened. She remembered nights when she counted coins just to buy milk for her child. She remembered being judged, being spoken to like she didn't matter. The manager waved his hand impatiently. "Just don't cause trouble." Maria brought the man a glass of water. When she placed it down, she leaned closer and whispered, "Please don't mind him." The man looked up, surprised. "Thank you," he said sincerely. As Maria walked away, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She watched as he slowly sipped the water, as if trying to make it last. Her chest felt heavy. Minutes passed. The lunch rush slowed. The manager disappeared into the back office. Maria glanced around. No one was watching. She made a decision. Quietly, she went into the kitchen, prepared a warm plate of food, and covered it with a napkin. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried it to the corner table. She placed the plate in front of the man. "For you," she whispered. His eyes widened. "I didn't order this." "I know," Maria said softly. "Please, eat." He looked up at her, searching her face. "I can't pay." Maria smiled gently. "You don't have to." For a long moment, the man didn't speak. Then he bowed his head slightly. "You're very kind," he said. Maria nodded and turned away, unaware that this simple act of kindness was being watched, and that it was about to cost her everything. Maria had barely taken 3 steps away from the corner table when she felt it. That sudden silence. The kind that makes your heart drop before you even know why. She turned slowly. The manager was standing near the kitchen door, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the plate of food in front of the quiet man. His face was dark with anger. "What is that?" he demanded. Maria swallowed. "Sir, it's just a plate of food." The manager walked closer, his shoes hitting the floor loudly. He snatched the napkin away and stared at the meal as if it were stolen gold. "Did he pay for this?" he asked sharply. The man opened his mouth, but Maria spoke first. "No. I gave it to him." The manager's eyes widened. "You gave it to him?" "Yes," Maria said quietly. "He was hungry." The manager laughed coldly. "So now you're running a charity? Do you think food here is free?" Customers stopped eating. Forks paused mid-air. Everyone was watching. "I told you the rules," the manager continued loudly. "No free food. Ever." Maria felt her face burn. "I understand the rules," she said, her voice shaking. "But he didn't do anything wrong." The manager slammed his hand on the table. "You did." He turned to the man in the corner. "Get out. Now." The man stood up slowly. "Please," he said calmly. "If there's a problem, let me." "Not you," the manager snapped. "Huh." He turned back to Maria. "You're fired." The words hit her like a punch. "What?" she whispered. "You heard me," he said loudly. "Hand over your apron. You're done." A woman in the crowd gasped. Someone muttered, "That's too harsh." Another shook his head in disbelief. Maria's hands trembled as she untied her apron. "Sir, I need this job," she said softly. "I have a child." The manager didn't care. Should have thought of that before breaking the rules. Tears filled Maria's eyes, but she refused to cry. "Not here. Not in front of everyone." She placed the apron on the counter. The quiet man watched everything in silence. His eyes were filled with something heavy, not anger, not pity, but deep thought. As Maria walked toward the door, humiliation burning in her chest, the man stood aside to let her pass. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for your kindness." Maria forced a small smile and nodded. She stepped outside into the cold air, her world suddenly uncertain. Behind her, the restaurant returned to its noise. Orders were called. Plates clattered. But something had changed. The manager didn't realize it yet, but the decision he made that day would soon come back to him. Maria walked outside, the afternoon sun warm on her face, yet it did nothing to lift the chill in her heart. Her stomach knotted as she thought about her child waiting at home, the bills she couldn't pay, and the shame of being fired in front of everyone. She leaned against the wall of the restaurant, trying to steady her breath. The sounds of the busy street mixed with the noise of dishes clanging inside, a reminder of the life she had just lost. And then she saw him. The quiet man. He stood near the curb, watching the restaurant from a distance. His hands were clasped calmly behind his back, his posture perfect, yet his eyes reflected concern. He didn't rush inside or make a scene. He simply waited. Maria's first instinct was to turn away, embarrassed and uncertain. Why is he still here? She wondered. Before she could move, he approached her slowly. His voice, low and calm, called out, "Excuse me, miss." Maria froze. "Yes?" "I wanted to thank you," he said, tilting his head slightly. "For your kindness." She blinked. "Thank me? But, you didn't order anything." "I didn't. Her voice faltered. He smiled faintly. "I know. That's why it mattered." Maria's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't ordinary. There was something different about him, a presence that seemed impossible to ignore. He wasn't showing off, but there was a quiet confidence in the way he held himself. Why are you still here?" she asked cautiously. "To see that you're safe," he said. His eyes softened as he glanced at her. "And to understand the kind of person you are." Maria didn't understand. I'm just a waitress. I just did what anyone should." He shook his head. "Not everyone would." She looked away, embarrassed. "I didn't expect anything in return." "Exactly," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Kindness, that's rare. And it doesn't go unnoticed." For a moment, Maria felt a flicker of hope and confusion. Something about this man felt important. But she had no idea just how important. He watched her quietly, then added, almost as if speaking to himself, "Some lessons have to be learned the hard way." Maria frowned. "What do you mean?" He only smiled, mysterious and calm. "You'll see. Don't worry about the restaurant. You did the right thing." And with that, he stepped back, blending into the crowd outside. Maria stood there, heart racing, unsure if she had just encountered a stranger, or someone who would soon change everything. Little did she know, the quiet man she had helped that day was no ordinary stranger. And the next time he returned, nothing would be the same. The next morning, the restaurant buzzed with its usual chaos. Orders were shouted, dishes clattered, and the staff moved quickly to keep up with the breakfast rush. Maria had not returned yet. She was still at home, heart heavy, wondering how she would explain to her child that they might be short on food again. Then, the door opened. All conversation seemed to freeze in that moment. The quiet man walked in again, but this time, everything about him had changed. Gone were the old, worn clothes. Gone were the dusty shoes. Instead, he wore a crisp suit, polished shoes, and an air of confidence that made heads turn. The staff froze. Customers whispered. The manager's face, which had been scowling all morning, shifted into confusion. He strode calmly to the counter, eyes scanning the room. Not threatening, not loud, just calm, commanding attention simply by standing there. "Can I help you?" the manager asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though a flicker of uncertainty crept in. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced around the room, stopping at the empty corner where Maria had served him the food the day before. Then, he looked at the manager. Something in his gaze made the manager take an involuntary step back. The staff exchanged nervous glances. Whispers began, "Who is he? He doesn't look like a customer. Why is he so calm?" The man finally spoke, his voice smooth but firm. "I wanted to see the staff in action today." The manager frowned. "The staff? What do you mean?" The man paused, letting the words sink in. "Especially the person who helped me yesterday, despite knowing the rules clearly stated otherwise." A ripple ran through the room. Customers and staff alike leaned forward, curiosity and suspense filling the air. The manager shifted uneasily. "Rules are rules," he said quickly. "She shouldn't have." The man raised a hand slightly, stopping him. "Rules are important," he said calmly. "But kindness matters more." The manager blinked, his mouth opening and closing, words failing him. Meanwhile, the staff whispered among themselves, recognition beginning to spread. There was something familiar about the man. Something they couldn't place. He smiled slightly, observing quietly, as if waiting for someone to notice. The quiet confidence, the calm aura, even the way he moved, it was all unusual. Then he looked again at the manager. "I came to see who values people over policies. Who understands that kindness is not weakness." The manager swallowed hard. He began to sense that this was no ordinary customer. Something was very different about this man. Across the room, a few customers nudged each other. "Do you think, could it really be him?" someone whispered. The man didn't confirm anything yet. He simply stood there, letting the tension grow, every word and movement building suspense, making the staff and manager feel a mix of fear, awe, and anticipation. Maria had no idea this was about to become the most important day of her life. The restaurant was unusually quiet now. Every customer, every staff member, even the manager, seemed to be holding their breath. The man in the suit had been standing calmly, his eyes scanning the room, waiting for the right moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice smooth and confident, cutting through the tension. "I suppose it's time I stop hiding." The staff exchanged puzzled glances. The manager's frown deepened. "Hiding? What are you talking about?" The man removed his jacket and loosened his tie, just slightly, and with a subtle motion, his face became unmistakable to those who had grown up watching action films, martial arts championships, and countless interviews. It was Steven Seagal. A hush fell over the room. A few customers gasped audibly. Some whispered in disbelief. The manager froze, his eyes widening. "Steven Seagal," one staff member whispered, barely able to speak. "Yes," the man said calmly. "Yesterday, I walked in disguised as a simple stranger to see the kind of people working here. I wanted to know who values humanity over rigid rules." The manager stumbled backward. I don't understand." The man's gaze sharpened, but it was not angry. It was measured, steady. "You fired her yesterday, in front of everyone, for showing compassion. Do you see now why that was a mistake?" The manager swallowed hard, his throat dry. He glanced at the empty corner where Maria had served him food and then back at the staff, who were now staring at him with quiet judgment. Stephen continued, "Kindness matters more than rules. Respect matters more than appearances. The woman you dismissed, the single mom who helped me when no one else would, deserves recognition, not punishment." The manager's face flushed. He had no words. He realized, painfully, how wrong he had been. Then Stephen turned to Maria, who had been standing at the doorway, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "You acted with a good heart when it mattered most. That is the kind of person I want in my team. You will keep your job, and you will be treated with the respect you deserve. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She had been humbled, scared, and embarrassed the day before, and now she felt a wave of relief and gratitude she could barely express. The manager bowed his head slightly, understanding his lesson. He had been harsh, rigid, and unfair. Now, in the presence of someone extraordinary, he realized that kindness was more powerful than authority. Stephen smiled, a calm, reassuring smile. Let this be a reminder, no act of compassion is ever wasted. You never know whose life you might touch. Whispers spread among the staff and customers. That was Steven Seagal. She helped him. He came back just to show appreciation. The room seemed to shift, from tension and embarrassment to awe and respect. And Maria, once humiliated, now stood tall, her courage and kindness recognized by everyone, including the man who mattered most. The lesson was clear. True character is revealed through kindness, not rules. The restaurant was buzzing like never before, but it wasn't the usual chaos of orders and clattering dishes. It was a mix of awe, whispers, and admiration. Maria, once humiliated and fired, now stood with a sense of dignity she hadn't felt in years. Steven Seagal had returned not just as a man in a suit, but as the real boss, the owner who had walked in disguise the day before. Every staff member and customer in the room could hardly believe it. The revelation had left them stunned, but it had also taught them something far more important than shock. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of relief and pride. The man she had helped yesterday, without a second thought, had recognized her courage, her kindness, and her unwavering integrity. Stephen spoke again, his voice calm but commanding. Kindness is rare. Compassion is powerful. Today, one woman showed that humanity matters more than rules. Maria, you will keep your job, and you will be treated with the respect you deserve. Applause erupted in the room. Customers cheered. The staff smiled, some even wiping tears from their eyes. The manager, who had once fired Maria publicly, now stood silently, humbled. He had been reminded, painfully, that authority without empathy is meaningless. Stephen turned to him. You see now that rules are important, yes, but they are not more important than people. Every decision you make impacts lives. Remember that. The manager nodded, his head lowered, understanding the gravity of his mistake. He would never forget the lesson taught that day by a simple act of kindness. Maria returned to her station, a renewed sense of confidence in her steps. She no longer feared judgment or humiliation. The small act of giving food to a stranger had transformed her life. She had learned that integrity and compassion can shine even in the darkest moments, and, sometimes, they bring unexpected rewards. As the day went on, word spread beyond the restaurant. Social media buzzed with the story of a single mom who helped a stranger and was rewarded by Steven Seagal himself. People everywhere shared their admiration, inspired by Maria's courage and humility. The story became a symbol of hope, that kindness is noticed, that good deeds are never wasted, and that integrity is always rewarded. Before leaving, Stephen gave Maria a final nod, a small smile of acknowledgement. It was a moment she would carry forever, proof that even in a world that can be harsh and unforgiving, goodness always matters. No matter how small your act of kindness, it can change lives, sometimes even your own. Stand firm, stay kind, and never let rules override compassion. Medium White Star. If you believe kindness matters more than rules, type respect in the comments. Medium White Star. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that good deeds always come back. Medium White Star. Subscribe for more inspiring, real-life stories that touch the heart.